Hope Channel, changing lives.
Hello, good evening, and it's another blessed day. We thank God for sparing our lives. We thank Him so much for all the mercies He has given to us by His grace. Today is a beautiful day, as you know, and for the month of July, we've been discussing wills. On the 4th of July, we looked at meaning and relevance of wills. Last week, we looked at the law, will, and inheritance. And this week, we are looking at preparation and execution of wills. Are there appropriate ways of preparing wills? And how do we legally execute them? This is what we are going to be discussing this evening. I am Efia Sewa Mansa, and you are welcome to Love at Home. I am so happy that today marks special days in one of our managers' lives. I'm talking about Mr. Ni Aite Hammond, Hope Channel's manager. God bless you. We pray that there'll be more love at home for you, and God should increase and make you great and strong to get more knowledge to push Hope Channel forward. Another beautiful birthday to an outstanding woman on Hope Channel Ghana, Superwoman, Mrs. Rebecca Esuman. Happy, happy birthday, and God bless you. Let's go for a quick break. When we come back, we continue with our discussion. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned.
Takwafwe asemdabo Hope Channel Ghana ye bama bobo ano pair ye ni West Central Ghana Conference of SC kuta musabosome ne deto so aduonu nwotwe afimpinu ne aduonu miese ya
ye ba chunchum ne yonyankopon waye bre a Hope Channel everyday one enuma fashe no nyum to kwa ya to yensa afa won ye Takwa Central kwa Amazing Grace Church kwa Etuabo Church kwa Akon Church kwa eni ahudro pi
so fanyina wati dwam na wonji dwumedi ababa eye so for God's hold akosi ajeman na wati na ye nidi nkwa Hope Channel yes sa abrabo Hope Channel ye ma eda so.
You can also be an angel of hope by dialing *928*34*104#, or you can send in your contributions to 024-919-3083. Today, I have with me my usual lawyer who has been helping us in the month of July, Lawyer Godwill Ansah. My able lawyer, good evening.
Good evening, Efia.
And you are welcome.
Thank you very much.
Please, how are you?
By the grace of God.
Your family?
Fine. Excellent.
Work?
Great.
We thank God. Lawyer says everything is well, and we thank God for that. Lawyer, today we are looking at the preparation and execution of wills. But before we go into that, I would want us to remind us what we went through or what we discussed last week.
Thank you very much, Efia, once again. Last 2 weeks, we looked at wills, generally what they mean, how or when they started, the benefits, and why it is imperative that we all consider preparing wills. Last week, we spent some time exploring the legal requirements of a valid will. We mentioned some points. Any person who is at least 18 years is eligible to prepare a will. We mentioned that for a will to be valid, it must be in writing. The will must concern property to which the person is entitled or will be entitled at the time of her death or thereafter. The person preparing the will must have the requisite mental capacity. We discussed it extensively. It must be signed. It must be witnessed. So those were some of the things we discussed last week, and then we also discussed intestacy.
Yeah.
What happens if one dies without a will? We discussed the Intestate Succession Act, which was intended to step in situations where a person dies without a will. We explained that it is not only men who can prepare wills, but women can also prepare wills. And then some challenges we have with the Intestate Succession Act.
Okay.
So I think these are some of the major themes we explored the previous 2 weeks.
Yeah, thank you very much. But let's go back a little for the sake of my viewers who are now joining, or is their first time joining. Who is qualified to have his or her will prepared? I know you mentioned the age of 18 and all that. What else? I just want us to come with you to be able to follow you today.
Okay, so basically anyone who is at least 18 years is qualified to prepare a will. In addition to the minimum age threshold, the person preparing a will must, the will must be in writing. And I explained that it could be typewritten, it could be handwritten. The most important thing is that the form is permanent and cannot be easily erased. And there mustn't be interlineations and things like that. It must be legible, but it could be handwritten, it could be typewritten. So minimum 18 years, it must be in writing. The will must be in respect of property. Today we will discuss that in detail. Property to which the person is entitled, either at the time of preparation of the will or to which the person will be entitled at the time of death or thereafter. Again, the person must have the mental capacity to prepare a will. And I explained that if by virtue of some disease or old age, the person has lost the ability to be able to understand what he or she is doing, the effect, then the person may be deemed to lack what is known as testamentary capacity. Besides what I've just mentioned, the person who prepared the will must sign it, and then there must be witnesses present. I will give the details as we go along.
Okay.
So anybody who fits the description I've just given can prepare a will.
Now let's look at the person helping the person to be writing the will. For example, the lawyer and all that. What capacity or legal capacity should such a person have?
Okay, so whilst it could be advisable, depending upon the size, the sophistication of the estate, to receive legal assistance, it is not a legal requirement that lawyers must all the time be involved in the preparation of a will. Okay. So as we've been discussing for the past, this is our third week, if someone listened carefully, understood what we have discussed, and prepared his or her own will, provided it meets all the requirements, it will be valid, even if it is without the assistance of a lawyer. Okay. But if for a very large estates, very sophisticated estates, for some technical reasons, it would be advisable if one would obtain legal services towards the preparation of such wills.
Well, now let's come to the processes. Are there processes for preparing wills?
Yes, so today, as you announced, let's focus on the mechanics of will preparation. So I'll give some general advice or counsel on a person. So we are assuming that you've listened to our discussions and you have taken a decision that you want to prepare a will. So you are at that point. Let's say you have your pen and a paper in your hand and you want to know, so what do I do? So that's the point we will take it from. Now, I think the first day you asked, and it is a common sentiment you hear. Some people take the view that, but they have nothing. Mm-hmm. They don't have anything. So I will mention some of the things that may appear in a will. And this could range from what we will describe as immovable property, comprising, let's say, houses, farms, lands, either solely owned by the testator or jointly owned with others. Okay. So immovable property, we typically have a house, a farm, farmland, or a land, bare land. Okay. And then you could also have things like vehicles, machines. We can talk about things like generator, block making machines. There are all kinds of machines that can come here. Some may be agricultural implements. Then we can discuss household items, all kinds of things in the household. We can talk about books and library, depending upon the profession of the individual. If you're a lawyer, maybe if you're a lecturer, maybe if you're a pastor, your library may be the most valuable asset you have. Clothes, women, men, depending upon what you have in your wardrobe. You could have so much clothes. Some people, we Seventh-day Adventists, this is not something you may find with many of us, but some people have jewelry, all kinds, including wristwatches and so on, ornaments. And then we will also talk about intellectual property, maybe copyright, if you have succeeded in publishing some work which has been very successful. You possess an intellectual property in that work that you can handle in your will. Shares.
Yeah.
Shares. So you may acquire shares by whatever means, whether you incorporated a company yourself or you bought shares in some venture on the stock exchange or otherwise. That's a property. And then investments, including cash you may have in your accounts, and sometimes policies, insurance policies, life policy, and so on. So when you look at it from this angle, it's not just a house, or it's the spectrum is wide. Okay. So it's advisable that when you get to a point when you want to write your will, spend some time and carefully explore as many of these things that you possess or will be possessed in the future at the time of your death or thereafter. List them so that you have a comprehensive list of these things.
So the first point is to list them.
Yes.
Okay.
It's advisable. So you have a total overview. And as I said, depending upon the size of the estate, for some people this will be a very tall list. For others it may be modest. But to have a comprehensive idea, it is better to list them. And when we're going through, you could imagine some may be shares, some may be this. So if you spend some time and list all of them, that will be, for some people they have several bank accounts. Sometimes they even forget some of them. Yeah, so you list all of them. So that would be an important first step, to list those things.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So after listing them, knowing where and where each of these assets are, what's next? So
the next thing I would recommend is that sit back, look at your life. Because what you do in your will essentially is to give directions, express your intentions. We call it testamentary declaration as to what should happen when you are dead. Okay, so sit back, look at your life. Who or which people are important in your life? And who are the persons that you would want to benefit from your estate? And this is also, so it's up to the individual. What the law does is to permit the individual, based upon his own sentiments, considerations as to what is appropriate or otherwise, his affections, to freely gift what he has. Yeah. So you look at it, but maybe from the Christian perspective, I should say that we have a duty towards certain people. The Bible puts it as those of our household. So we have a duty towards them. But it is not just a biblical requirement. It's also a legal requirement, somewhat. Okay. So there are a certain category of people. The law describes them as dependents.
Okay.
The law describes them as dependents. And when we talk about dependents, we are talking about parents, father, mother, spouse, wife, husband, and then children, child or children. So these people, they have certain rights and entitlement. So what the law says is that if you prepare a will and you do not make reasonable provision for these people I have mentioned, either in your lifetime, so if in your lifetime you had already made reasonable provision for them and you exclude them in your will, provided the evidence is there that you've already taken care of them, it will not matter. Also, if it is obvious that they were dependent on you and you failed to make reasonable provision for them, if you exclude them, if you do not make adequate or reasonable provision for them in your will, upon the death of the testator, they can go to court and seek redress. They can apply and invite the court to intervene and make reasonable provision for them. Okay, so if you don't want your estate and what happens after death to descend into chaos and trouble, it is important that you carefully consider these category of people, father, mother, spouse, and child or children at the time of preparing a will. But if, on the other hand, some reasonable provision has already been made in the lifetime of the individual, for example, and a child here, I should explain, a child, strictly speaking, is someone who is under 18 years.
Okay, I was going
so
to ask
if
that.
the person is above 18 years, not in school, you've already educated the person, maybe working and so on. It is not obligation on a parent to make a provision in the will. But if the person is young, still going to school, dependent on you, and you do not make provision, a court of law will intervene and make a provision.
No, like I was going to ask, if you say dependent, what exactly do you mean?
Basically, in order not to stretch it, dependents are persons who at the time, during the lifetime of the testator, enjoyed maintenance of a sort from the testator. Sometimes, so this is one of the slippery grounds, areas where if you do not handle properly, could easily create grounds for dispute after the death of the testator. So there are instances where the person fits the description of a spouse or even a child, all right. But along the line, maybe some disaffection arose and the person was no longer providing maintenance, or there were some disputes and so on. If, for example, the marriage is still in subsistence, if the person is required to provide maintenance but has merely refused or declined to provide maintenance, it will not absolve him or her or the estate from obligation. So dependent means the person enjoyed some maintenance. It is within the bracket we have described: father, mother, spouse, child, and was receiving maintenance or was entitled to receive maintenance during the lifetime of the testator.
Okay. Now, we are done with the second point, where you are giving the instruction. Now, which one is the third point?
Okay, so now you have a complete inventory of the things you want to that belong to you. That's first step. Second step, you have taken a very careful or undertaken a very careful appraisal of your life, and you have a clear idea based on your judgment, your affections and sentiments as to how you want to distribute your assets. So, as I said earlier, it must be in writing. So you write. Because I have indicated that it doesn't have to be always prepared by a lawyer, you could write it in your own language in a manner that is very clear. One problem with wills is that you could easily create problems if there are ambiguities in the will. So you have to write it, write your name, maybe where you live, and the fact that this is intended to be your will.
Should it be only in English, or can I write it in my native language?
You can write it in your native language.
Okay.
You can write it in it must be in writing. The requirement is not that it must be in English language. So it could be in your native language.
Okay.
So you write, you mention your name and the fact that this is intended to be your will. because for some people, they might have written a will earlier, it is advisable to indicate that you intend this to be your last will, and that all earlier wills prepared are revoked by this one.
So this will supersede all other
previous
ones.
Yeah. So normally you have to take care of that, especially if I've written one before and you are writing another one. Now, there is something I left out, so let me mention. So when a person dies and died testate, in other words, prepared a will, in the will you have to appoint people we describe as executors. Executors are persons you choose or indicate in your will as persons you want to implement the wishes expressed in your will upon your death. So normally, typically, apart from mentioning your name and the fact that you intend this to be your last will and that it revokes all earlier or previous wills, you will also mention who your executors are. The law permits minimum 2, maximum 4, but typically 2. And who qualifies to be an executor? The person must be minimum 21 years and must also have sound mind, ability to perform the role assigned to the person. As a practical advice, not a legal requirement, for the average person, I would advise that you choose people who are not older, because in the natural course of things, all things being equal, older people will predecease younger people. So if you selected executors who are well older than yourself, maybe by the time you die and it is important to have your executors, they would have all died. So it's preferable to choose persons who are relatively younger. And also, as a matter of practical advice, it is important not to just choose just anyone, but someone that it's likely the beneficiaries of your estate will know by the mention of the name. And also persons who are reasonably honest and will not abuse the position of trust entrusted to them. So you will need executors, and you have to mention your executors in your will. In this era of advancement, I would even advise that you put their contact numbers and maybe email address in the will, so that they could be easily contacted if there is a difficulty. Afterwards, after you've done what I've mentioned so far, now you go into the actual distribution of the property to which you are entitled or will be entitled. Normally, if it is a mixture of both immovable and movable, people will dispose of the immovable first. If there are houses or a house or a farm, land or a farm, they will deal with them. And then you come to the movables. Clothes, vehicles, investments, bank accounts, shares, intellectual property rights and books and all the things I've mentioned. You indicate the property and the person you are gifting to. Maybe in the last series we will discuss Christian wills and how it may differ from the average will.
Yeah, we will do that next week.
So in looking at who is important to you, maybe next week we'll handle that. But for the Christian, it is not just the people around you. We also encourage as much as possible those blessed. All of us are blessed, but you can express gratitude to God by even the way we write our wills. So let's preserve that for next week. And so you have written the will, started, and in the body you have indicated the things to which you are entitled, you possess, and who should have them.
And also stated your executors.
You have also stated or indicated who your executors are. If you are writing it yourself at home, make sure that don't just say my son and my children and my daughter, but describe my husband or my wife. Go a step further, mention their names, be specific. So do all of that.
Lawyer, this side is interesting. Let's go for a quick break, and when we come back, I'm sure Lawyer is ready to walk us through the process so that we just don't write my son or my wife, but rather put names. Lawyer, we'll be right back. Please stay tuned, we'll be right back, my lovely viewer.
I am an angel of hope.
I'm an angel of hope.
Ubrenio, so do sika a beba Hope Channel. No one so yasene. Yet me the miasam ako o main chia so ni chorom yana. Wadaroma, fa main na fa usika fasubi na also fa bra. Nko kanyamsem enya kra ewunkwa. Star 928 star 34 star 104 hash. Anase 0249 193083. Hope Channel, yes, it's Sabrabo. Hope Channel, yeah, Gia Cranomqua. Takwafwe, my cradwana. Hope Channel, Eddie Fienum, yes, Hope Channel at 5. Yet in answer Nisi Ho, Yadi Jumedia Strong Ashes Shasso, Mitchell Go City, Yabatakwa, aye, a fear that could have supposed to that also do no watching. I think Pinunia do no same. A dano, yet two jump a hymns night in Kwa, yet you trade employer, no made that could have supposed to that also do no cono, and also a fita, yes, Nadina coupon, a bomb pine in a meeting tampai boom. Look what's the other, Mitchell 30th of July. I could have supposed to that also Edriasan, no, ye Nantio, and you walk with Hope Channel. Jumediation Kunina a Koso, or the Goldfish Junior Clubhouse, a Contakwa. Yamia Dumo, Metire Kutawasabusumi ya Hope Channel at 5, Takwa 4, Yanumwa na 80. You did some person over Shades Aquani, but more than a way Aquania Sonkwa, when you have seen a phone and Flumina Bania Cabomo, Nayina Kupway. Hope Channel, Enfienum Chayo, Hope Channel, Yema and it does so.
This event is in partnership with West Central Ghana Conference, Takwa.
You are welcome back to Love at Home on Hope Channel Ghana, and we are discussing preparation and execution of wills. And lawyer was telling us that we should write properly to avoid ambiguity. Lawyer, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so at the minimum, there are two levels. So, for example, whether it is a house or a land or a farm, for example, or even a vehicle. It is not enough to just say, I don't want to use a technical word. We use devices and but let me just say, don't just say I gift or I give my house at Tema to my daughter, okay, or I give any money in my account at the time of my death to my son. Okay, when you do that, you leave you leave vital information as to which account you are talking about, or which house in Tema you are talking about. You also leave vital information as to which son or daughter you are talking about. So if you are talking about a house, be specific, describe it. Some people may indicate 1-bedroom house, 2-bedroom house, 3-bedroom house, located on, they may even give details about the land. These days that we have GPS address and things like that. So give as much information so that we have no confusion in our minds as to what you are describing. The same applies to the recipient or the intended beneficiary. If it is your son, even if it is only one son, mention his name. If it is a daughter, even if it is only one, mention. Okay, so that's some of them, some of the things. So be as precise as possible concerning both the property you are gifting and the recipient. If you are giving one property to several recipients, it will be advisable to indicate whether you want them to share it equally or in some particular proportions.
For example, one house you are giving to several people.
Yes. Is it that you are gifting 1 bedroom each to each of the beneficiaries, or if that will not be possible, indicate how. Is it that you want them to sometimes rent it and then share the rent proceeds in a certain way? However you want it to be done, describe it in as precise language as possible. Because otherwise, what was intended for good may end up itself creating problems. So avoid ambiguity. I give this to my son and all my grandchildren, and then there's a problem. We don't know even the
one
people.
person decides to go and sell or to go and sell.
No, even the people you are describing, we find it difficult to understand who they are.
And identify them.
Yes, there are certain technical things. I don't want to bring them here. But if you say, for example, all my grandchildren, okay, and you have 6 children, maybe 2 or 3 of them are already adults, married with children, but the others are young, some are in school, they are not even yet married. How do we share the property? Because some are yet to even marry.
Yeah.
If we share it today and subsequently they marry and they have children, they are also grandchildren, how do we take care of them? So there are some things lawyers know, but all I'm saying is that if you are writing your own will, avoid situations where we will not understand what you are talking about, and because that can defeat and vitiate, will render the will void. So you need to avoid those ambiguities. But generally, after you've written the will, appointed your executors, you've written the will, you've indicated what should go to whom, then you have to sign. You have to sign. Anything you write beneath your signature in your will will not be valid, will not count as part of the will. So everything you want to indicate must come before you sign.
Okay.
Now, the signing also has its own special requirements. So the will must be signed in the presence of 2 witnesses at the same time.
All right.
Or the testator must acknowledge his or her will in the presence of 2 witnesses at the same time. So the requirement is not that you have to give it to them to read, to know the content. But if you sign, go and call a witness to come and sign. After that witness has left, you call another witness to come and sign. It will not be valid. Both witnesses must be present at the same time. Okay. And both of them must witness that you are signing the will, or in their presence, you acknowledge that this is my will, I signed here, okay, and I want you to witness it for me. Okay. And both of them are present and both witness. Okay. So that's about the witnessing. Okay. There is another thing I must indicate. So if you have included someone as a beneficiary in the will, and the person is also a witness, okay, unless after excluding that person as a witness, the will would still be valid, the disposition made in favor of that person in the will will be invalid.
Please say that again.
So let me explain. Let me take my time and explain it. So let's say we are siblings and our mother was preparing a will. And let's say the only persons who witnessed the will were the 2 of us. Mm-hmm. And in her will, she had willed this house, that land, that money to us. And so what that would mean is that we were the only persons who were the witnesses of that will. Mm-hmm. Without us, there will be no witnesses. Mm-hmm. And everything in some of the things in the will have been gifted to us. So if you challenge that will and you exclude us as witnesses, there will be no witnesses. Yeah. That kind of will, anything given to us will be rendered invalid.
Wow.
So it is better to have independent or persons who are not necessarily beneficiaries, so that they are not motivated, because the presumption is that you may be testifying because of what you stand to gain. But we want persons who may not have any interest in the will, but were indeed present and saw that the person had the capacity to execute the will, understood what he was doing, and they witnessed, and he said, please witness this for me. So that's very important.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, let's come back to the executors. What are their main roles?
Thank you, Efia. So the executors, upon the death of the testator, so I'll come back to it, but let's say the will has been executed or signed and witnesses were present, the witnesses will also sign. Last week, I explained that people with disability, it could be blindness, it could be illiteracy, whatever, they can also prepare their wills. Yeah. So if the person is blind, the person who wrote the will must read over it, explain it. It may even be that the person doesn't, you spoke about language earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe the will has been written in English, but the testator doesn't understand English. The person who prepared it must interpret it in a language
that he can understand.
That he understands. And after that has been done, and the person says, I agree, what you have told me, it is exactly what I want you to write. Then the person will write that I did the interpretation to the testator understood everything, okay. And afterwards, the testator printed or signed here. Okay. Or if it's a blind person, for example, directed me that I should sign yes. And then the witnesses will witness. So that's just, so after that, the testator may seal a copy of the will and deposit it in the registry of the court. They will also seal it, and you keep it there. For us, you may also deposit a copy at the conference within which you stay. Okay. Now, the person is dead. People don't like this part about wills, but the reality is that until Christ comes, it's a cycle. We are born, we grow, we live our lives, by and by, death. So the testator dies, and somebody must be aware that there is a will in existence. Earlier, the very first day, we mentioned that it may be your lawyer, it may be some family members who are aware that you have written a will and you have deposited a copy in the court registry. It may be your church pastor or some people. Mm-hmm. But it's important that you let some people, responsible people close to you, be aware, because if the will is in existence but those people are not aware, your estate will fall into intestacy. Yeah. They will treat it as if there is no will. Yeah. But now, let's say they are aware that there is a will, so they retrieve it, they go to the court registry and retrieve it. They open it, and then they get to know the content. Part of the content is that we will get to know who the executors are. Okay. That's your question. Yes. What are they supposed to do? What they are supposed to do is to apply for what is known as probate. Okay. Okay, so they will make an application to the court and seek the court to grant them the authority to execute the will. Okay. Perform the duties that the will requires them to perform. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they apply, and then if there are no disputes and wranglings, the court grants them the probate. So they obtain the probate. When they obtain the probate, their duty, now I'm answering your question. Yes. Their duty is to ensure that they do as the will expects them to do. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if the will, for example, instructs that a house should be given to someone, the person is still alive, the house is there, but it is also possible that between the time the will was written and the time the testator died, and eventually probate was obtained, not everything stated in the will will be present,
Yeah.
or not everyone mentioned in the will will be alive.
Very true.
But we are assuming that everything
All things
is,
being equal.
everything is present, everyone is alive. So their duty will be to use the word vest, for example. Okay. So if there is a house and the instruction in the will is that I gift this to my daughter, Efiasewa, okay, the duty of the executor is to, with the assistance of lawyers, prepare a document that transfers the property to Efiasewa.
Okay.
If this farmland is supposed to go to Kofi, they will do that. Okay. If there are investments, money in bank account and so on, they will contact the banks and indicate that this customer of yours is dead, we have obtained probate, we introduce ourselves, we are the executors, this is a copy of the will. According to the will, the money in this account should be given to Efiasewa. Okay. We are authorizing you, please. Usually they will like to know the balance on the account, and then they will vest it in the person or transfer it to the person. So their duty is to ensure that the wishes of the testator are effected or implemented according to what is in the will. Now, you will notice that to be an executor, depending upon the size of the estate, the nature of the people involved could be a Herculean task.
Very.
You may have to travel to some parts of the country, visiting property or projects. You may have to meet family members, immediate, extended, and so on. Sometimes there is a quarrel, and you step in now like the father or the mother whose estate you are executing. So it requires some minimum dedication and commitment. And there are instances where some may
What about financial?
Yes, so that will be charged to the estate.
Okay.
If the executors have to appoint lawyers, for example, to assist them in obtaining the probate, to assist them in investing properties in beneficiaries and so on, and they incur expenses, they have to charge it to the estate.
Okay.
Yeah. Or in circumstances where there is no money, then the beneficiaries must pay for it. Yeah.
But what about in case or in circumstances where the executors are incapacitated, maybe during the time of executing?
Incapacitated, they are dead.
They are so dead, or they can't move, they can't even talk.
So if you get to a circumstance where they are either unable or unwilling to perform, you can apply to the court, and then they will apply. You apply for letters of administration with will annexed. Okay, so they will appoint administrators, not executors. Okay. But it is also not like intestacy.
Okay.
They will appoint administrators with will annexed. So there will be administrators, but they will execute the will as if they were executors. Okay. So that is what will happen.
Oh. This is wonderful. Lawyer, a friend of mine from the US was telling me something that he was surprised. She got there one day, she heard a knock on the door, and it was a lawyer drawing or giving him or her the call card that if she needs any services, she can call on him. And she was surprised because in Ghana, you don't even know where the lawyers are located, and it looks like it's for the elite. How true is that?
Okay, so you have about two
questions
different
in one
questions
because of my
involved.
time.
Yeah, two questions in what you have said. So, in the US, for example, there are ethics, professional ethics, governing the practice of law, medicine, and other recognized professions are different from, let's say, what happens in England, which is what is mirrored in Ghana. So in Ghana, we don't advertise as lawyers. And the same thing, doctors don't advertise. We call it touting. You don't, even when if you've been to chambers, legal offices of lawyers before, they put a very small
signpost
plate affixed to the wall, indicating that this is law office. They will not do a big banner advertising their services. It is against the profession. So that's why you don't see lawyers advertising in Ghana. So it would be unprofessional for a lawyer in Ghana to be going house to house or office to office, distributing call cards and all of that.
Okay.
But in the US, they do that. Okay. So that's why you don't see that in Ghana. Okay. Do lawyers offer services only to the elite? No. So two things I would say. Generally, legal services are not cheap. You will have to pay a good money to get services of lawyers. So it is not in doubt that it is not everyone who can afford legal services. But two things I would say. For the topic we are discussing, many Adventist lawyers often, for purposes of trust services, and because we promote, we encourage as many Seventh-day Adventist Christians as possible to write their wills. Usually we organize programs at the local church levels, and as many as are willing to write their wills, either at a very small fee or sometimes even without any fee, they are giving assistance. Okay. So that's on one hand, but even at the national level, we have the Legal Aid Board where lawyers offer their services pro bono. Okay. Apart from very minimal incidental expenses, maybe traveling expenses and so on, they don't really charge for some cases. So there are a lot of instances where poor people receive legal assistance, not because they are able to afford, but they are giving assistance. Yeah.
Well, lawyer, my time is up. Kindly give us your counsel, your last word on our discussion for today.
Okay.
But let me remind you that next week we are going to continue with this discussion, and it will be great. Don't miss it.
Okay, so what we've done today is to try to walk our viewers through the mechanics of will preparation. We've discussed in practice, if you had your pen and paper in hand, how to go about the process of writing your will. I hope those who spend time to listen to us have derived some valuable insights, and those who need further assistance may contact their local, if they are Seventh-day Adventists, if they contact their local trust services leaders, they may give them further assistance. What we will repeat again today is that it is in the interest of all of us to consider this matter seriously, to save our dependents, loved ones, from hardship which may be visited on them if we neglect to do it. I had said earlier that we discuss it as wills, but it is not just wills, it is succession planning. Yeah. It is planning your life.
Also, so my time is up, my lovely viewer, and thank you so much for joining me on this show. We have discussed a lot, and same time next week we will come again, and that discussion will be wow. You will not miss it for anything. What I know is that we are preparing ourselves to make sure that our homes always remain happy, joy, and what have you, so that there will always be love at home. Same time next week, we come again. Good night and bye-bye.